Way back in the middle of March, at the beginning of the pandemic lockdown, a poem started flying around the internet. It was sent to me by at least a dozen different people, and I'm sure that many of you saw it. It's called Pandemic, and it begins like this. What if you thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel. Cease from buying and selling. Give up, just for now, on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You could hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in each other's hands. Surely that has come clear. That's the first half of the poem, but it gives you the gist. The poem is called Pandemic.
Help! I lost the sound.
Okay. This is the first half of the poem. It gives you the gist. The poem is called Pandemic by Lynn Unger, who is Jewish and also a Unitarian Universalist minister. I poked around a little bit on the internet to find out more about her and learn that she sat down and wrote it one Wednesday afternoon in March and posted it on Facebook. Within hours, it had gone viral. For many of us, that poem provided a powerful way of accepting the need to confine ourselves to our homes. The poem offered a beautiful, comforting, helpful reframing of the pandemic, from a worldwide healthcare emergency to a worldwide Sabbath. Now it has been 3 strange months since Lynn Unger wrote her poem. It has been a long Sabbath, during which we have stopped doing so many things. Stopped going out to parties, to concerts, to movies, to restaurants, to temple. We have slowed down our physical pace of life. But it has not been a Sabbath of peace. All around the world, governmental leaders and healthcare professionals and ordinary people have all been struggling to understand this novel coronavirus and how it spreads and whom it kills and who remains asymptomatic. Every day there is new data and new predictions appear. Experts offer conflicting advice. Infection rates drop and then rise again all over the world. The future is still so uncertain. When can we realistically hope for a vaccine? When will our lives return to what they were? I don't know about you, but for me, these 3 months have not been a time of rest. I need a sabbatical from this sabbatical. So I feel immensely grateful to this congregation for providing me with just that. I will be on a 2-month mini sabbatical for the months of July and August. This was planned several years ago, long before any of us knew what a strange time this would be. But the temple leadership and I have decided that COVID-19 pandemic notwithstanding, I should take this sabbatical as planned. Tonight, I would like to share with you a little bit of how this sabbatical summer fits into my life. This is the 3rd sabbatical of my career. The first was in my mid-30s, an entire year in the English Lake District, just below the border of Scotland. Marion and I took Rachel, age 4, and Ari, who was only 2, to live with Marion's parents in their 17th century stone farmhouse, high green rig house, on a windswept and remote hillside which they ran as a small hotel. That was a magical year in our life, and we came close to deciding to move there permanently. My second sabbatical was 7 years ago, in the summer of 2013, when Marion and I walked the entire 220 miles of the John Muir Trail in the High Sierras. I was 56 at the time, and those 3 weeks in the mountains changed the course of my life. In 3 weeks of carrying all of our food and equipment on our backs and sleeping on the ground and climbing over 11 mountain passes, I stopped feeling that I was declining into late middle age. I felt young and strong and not even close to getting old. I returned convinced that our Jewish education program had to incorporate outdoor hiking experiences into our kids' Jewish learning. And I began spending almost every day off hiking on our local trails. Gaviota Peak, Tunnel Trail, Rattlesnake Canyon, Cold Spring Canyon, San Isidro, Romero Canyon, and also the backcountry, Manzana Creek out behind Figueroa Mountain, and Blue Canyon behind our Santa Ynez Mountains. The more I hiked these trails and got to know them in their seasons, I began to recognize and to learn the names of the wildflowers, the alpine shooting stars, and ceanothus, and rose snapdragon, and woolly blue curls, Indian pinks and paintbrush, and climbing penstemon and woodmint. And I finally got curious about the Chumash, the indigenous people who lived here for thousands of years, some of whose secret sacred places I discovered. And at last, after 30 years of living in Santa Barbara, I began to feel that this is my home, my place, my land, my mountains, flowers, birds, lizards, trails, islands, oceans. All of that began with my last sabbatical, and specifically our 3 weeks on the John Muir Trail. Now I'm 63, and looking both into the past and into the future, I'm struck with wonder. It was just over 40 years ago that I set out on this path of being rabbi. And you don't need to be a rabbi, to know that 40 years is a very biblical number. In fact, in this week's Torah portion, Chukat, the 40 years in the wilderness goes by quietly, without any explicit notion or noting. Just a few chapters earlier, we were at the start of the Israelites' wilderness journey. And now suddenly, without any awareness of the passage of time, we are suddenly in the final year of the 40 years. And at age 63, that's exactly the way it feels to me. Just a chapter or two ago, I was in my early 20s, and now 40 years have gone by. What happened? Looking back, I'm struck with wonder, and also looking ahead. I know 60 is the new 50, or is it the new 40? But nevertheless, I wonder what's next. More than anything else, I know that this time away will be a time in which my future will rise up into view before me. I have several projects for this summer about which I am excited. I have already begun learning Spanish, finally, after 35 years living in California. And I am revising a book that I wrote years ago and hope to get published. And Marion and I are returning to the John Muir Trail. This time our plan is to hike the whole thing again, but this time from south to north. It will take about 21 days. And during that time, we will see no roads, no wires, no emails, no news. I'll show you a quick view of what I will see, if I can. mountains, lakes, sky, trees, and Marion, and occasional other hikers. It takes me about 3 days on the trail to begin stopping to think about work. After a week, I'm not thinking about work at all. After 3 weeks, we will both be physically hardened and worn out, but on a deeper level, brand new. It's good for our marriage too, by the way. The job of being a rabbi has been the great honor and privilege of my life, but it is a job that never ends. From early in the morning until late at night, the sadness and the joy, the weight of the past, the questions about the future, and all of the people, tiny children, hormonal teenagers, stressed out parents, aging seniors, all with desires, needs, opinions. There is nothing more exciting, nothing more interesting, nothing more holy than what happens in our community. But a rabbi needs a rest. Having opened with the new poem, Pandemic, I'd like to close this evening with an English translation of one of my very favorite Hebrew poems by the late, great Israeli poet Uri Tzvi Greenberg. I included this poem in the Friday night prayer book we used back at Hillel earlier in my career. And in the image, in the poem, Greenberg imagines God as a blacksmith and himself, the poet, the Jew, as the piece of metal on the anvil, which God strikes, bringing forth fire and sparks. I love to read this poem just before Shabbat because it ends with the phrase, "Let us both rest." I think it's a fitting closing word before I leave for sabbatical. And it's called "With My God, the Smith." Maybe I'll even put it up on the screen so you can all see it. Let's see here. There it is. With my God, the Smith. Like chapters of prophecy, my days burn in all the revelations. And my body between them is a block of metal for smelting. And over me stands my God, the Smith, who hits hard. Each wound that time has opened in me opens its mouth to him and pours forth in a shower of sparks the intrinsic fire. This is my just lot, until dusk on the road. And when I return to throw my beaten block on a bed, my mouth is an open wound, and naked, I speak with my God. You worked hard. Now it is night. Come, let us both rest. Shabbat Shalom.